for coming out tonight to hear an incredible story of survival and peace from Hideko Tamura Snider. 2015 marks the 70th anniversary of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima by the United States on August 6, 1945. OSU is observing this anniversary in several ways, including this event and an exhibit of historical materials from our extensive nuclear history collections at the Special Collections and Archives Research Center at OSU Valley Library. We welcome you to come and view this exhibit on the 5th floor of the library. Original historical materials and documentary primary sources, such as the ones found in this exhibit, help us tell the stories from the past. But these paper documents are never quite as meaningful as a true eyewitness to an event. Tonight, we hear from one such witness and are honored to hear her message of peace and to help her spread her message of peace. Corvallis is proud to be one of 6,857 cities in 161 countries around the world participating in the Mayors for Peace program, which works to transcend national boundaries to work together for nuclear disarmament. To introduce Hideko, I'd like to welcome Corvallis' Mayor for Peace, Biff Traber.
Well, good evening. It's quite a crowd here this evening, so it's very heartwarming to see everybody out to hear Hideko this evening. Thank you for the kind introduction, and I'm honored to introduce tonight's speaker. But I wanted, before doing that introduction, to actually spend a moment with two quotes that I wanted to put together in an interesting fashion. The first quote begins, "On the day when two Army corps can mutually annihilate each other in a second, all civilized nations will surely recoil with horror and disband their troops." The second quote is longer and goes, "I believe that there will never again be a great world war, a war in which the terrible weapons involving nuclear fission and nuclear fusion would be used. And I believe that it is the discoveries of scientists upon which the development of these terrible weapons was based that is now forcing us to move to a new period in the history of the world, a period of peace and reason. When world problems are not solved by war or by force, but are solved in accordance with world law in a way that does justice to all nations and that benefits all people." That first quote, you've probably heard both, most of you probably heard both of those, but it's the combination of the two I find interesting, because your first one is Alfred Nobel expressing his expectation of a future, that we will get there, that he actually helped contribute to get there in an ironic fashion. And it's this future that the second quote, which is Linus Pauling at his acceptance speech for his Nobel Peace Prize, it is this future that he was referring to. So in some sense, what we have with these two quotes is we see two men talking about the future, and we have Linus Pauling talking about the future that Alfred Nobel expected, and he was referring to it that way. But even today, what is it now, 50 some odd years since Pauling received his Peace Prize, we have yet to reach this period of peace and reason. And that's in part why, realizing that optimism from 50 years ago and where we are today, is why I'm honored to introduce Hideko Tamura Snider, a person who can speak to both aspects these quotes bring out, the terrible weapons and the need to continue to work toward that period of peace and reason, abolishing those weapons. She is a Hiroshima survivor, author, and nonprofit director of One Sunny Day Initiative. She has come to share with us her story of resilience, her wisdom, her knowledge of ongoing work for global nuclear weapons abolition. Despite losing her mother, her best friend's mother, and other loved ones in the Hiroshima bombings on August 6th, Ms. Snider has traveled the world to share her painful memories for a purpose. These memories, as you can imagine, are deeply painful, and words cannot capture how difficult it must be for her to re-experience this day, 70 years ago every time she is brave enough to recount the tragedy she lived through. So thank you all for coming out tonight to hear this story. She stands as one of the few living reminders to all of us. At the 2015 official commemorations of the bombings, both the mayors for peace in Hiroshima and Nagasaki called for the world to take heed and listen to the stories of survivors. Ms. Snider was 10 years old the day of the bombing. She is someone who has reason to do nothing for peace because of the pain she has experienced. But instead, she has spent her life working for a better world where resources could be put to human needs and solving the underlying causes of war, injustice and poverty. Since 1975, Hideko Snider has been appearing before professional organizations, university classes, community groups across the United States and in her native Japan, telling her story and encouraging people of all cultures and nations to examine the consequences of the use of nuclear weapons and to work toward peace and nuclear nonproliferation. She tells of the challenge of peace and of lessons we have learned from Hiroshima since the war. Please join me in welcoming Hideko Tamura Snider from Medford, an Oregonian we can all be deeply proud of, who serves as a unique individual on the international scale to plant seeds of peace. So welcome, Hideko.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, everyone who is here this evening. I am so honored to be in your presence and have an opportunity to share with you what I have learned in these 70 years. Very challenging years, but I'm not here to tell you a crying story, although I may cry. I'm here to tell you about kind of gift every one of you have in this audience. As I share with you what happened to me, you are just as capable of awakening within yourself as a human being, facing this world today filled with threats to the gift of our lives from every direction. Now let me begin my story that began in Hiroshima. I want you to meet my relations, my home, my family. This is the Tamura family. My grandfather, you see, wearing kimono, sitting down, is Hideko Tamura. Ran a multinational corporation and led industry in Hiroshima. The boys sitting and standing are my cousins. I'm the only girl. In the center, my father, who actually is a lover of French Impressionist art. He himself, ardent painter, now having to wear army uniform. He was drafted and leaving, and everyone gathered to wish him safe journey. I don't think we were quite like Spartan mothers. Don't come back alive. We wanted them to come back alive. And I want you to meet my mother, Hideko Tamura. She looks a bit sad because my father was leaving and we, of course, there was a good chance he might not come back. And she's wearing kimono on this occasion, but she was a very modern woman. Most of the time wore dresses. Then, 1945, the atomic bomb happened. And here, for a human story, I would add some with just tiny bits of numbers. You know, under that cloud, within a few days, 70,000 people died. Under that cloud, my house came down. And in the house, I was bruised, hurt, didn't know what happened. And science of the bomb would tell you it was the utmost lethal weapon of the time. Explosive power, exploding, damaging, destroying physical properties, which included body parts. It had, the minute the power of the wind hit one direction, it came back. And there was a suction power within the coming back wind that sucked out people's organs, eyeballs, intestines. And in it was the radiation that penetrated to the marrow of our bones. So that even if you survived the explosion, and even if you didn't have any bruises, it destroyed marrow of your bones where the blood cells are made. Your body couldn't function. But many of us, you know, we try to survive and hang on to the gift that was given to us when we came onto this earth. Try to live in hovering motions and fell to the street, the ground. Breathed very hard because your body didn't have oxygen. You can't breathe. Lining of your organs collapsed, but they lived for hours and hours. I saw as I looked for my mother. I could not find her. I could not find her. You know what that is? I was an only child. For you too. There's only one mother. And in a situation like that, you need your mother to tell you, you hang on to me, we're going to make it. Well, I didn't have anyone who can tell me that. But you know what child does? I think human beings can become a tank. Bring everything inside, all your brain power. Just bring everything and then shut down. Because you feel guilty afterwards because you didn't feel sorry for these people moving and dying after a while. That's a terrible thing. But if it happens to you, you heard it from me, it's okay. It's your body's function to protect yourself. And I did not turn into powder, crying, Ma, I don't know what to do, please pop up somewhere. I need you. Well, I was lucky. My father, who was elsewhere, stayed alive. He wasn't, by that time, he was an officer in the army, started from foot soldier. And under that crowd, so many people died in a very difficult way. If you evaporate it, that, I think Linda's poster showed, there were some shadows where people were evaporated. I don't know in that instance what that experience was like for that person. But for the rest of us, it was an agony, unbearable, excruciating agony. No help, no medicine, no doctors. I had a huge glass shards that I asked somebody, help me. I was one of those weakling who couldn't even touch anything, and run to my mother and says, Ma. And there was this big thing stuck in my foot, and no one would pay any attention to it. Help yourself. Everybody's hurt. So I sat down. I think I realized then the end of my childhood has come. I am going to have to take care of myself, and actually save my life on my own. And it has been that way ever since. August 6, 8/15, 1945. You're not a child. You're grown men and women, young women, mature people. You can do all of these things. If it sounds scary, if you are alive, you can be truthful and faithful to your humanness inside to survive. Your body will instantly direct you to do that. Child that I was, I kept on following my mother's teaching before. Go to the river, don't be surrounded in the fire, because that's how people died in the incendiary bombs, which was General LeMay's method of terminating Japanese citizens from the sky. This one was even more effective. It was war. You need not feel badly about that the Americans were so very effective. You were in the war, and this was American solution. I was a child. I knew nothing about what of anything, but all I knew was, Ma, where are you? What am I going to do? And just following her instructions, following riverbanks. And some people who were still alert were facing to the city with their hands clasped and praying. I did the same. The whole time, the most scary thing, after the humongous sound of the bomb explosion, is that ammunition dump must have caught fire, because every minute there was humongous explosion going on, and it felt like you're going to get killed any minute again. I didn't know where it was coming from, but the sound. And I noticed that the other survivors didn't talk about it. And I said, don't you remember hearing that? Oh, yeah, yeah. Wasn't that scary? Oh, yeah. I think some people went into sort of like, numbness, maybe faster than I did, because I was worried about my mother. My father too, but then I figured, well, he's in the army, he has other people to work with. And my mother and my cousin were towards the center of the city, helping with taking down the torn buildings and incendiary bombs that you have to clear these things because they become kindling wood. We never heard from them. 2 people saw each of these kins of mine and my mother. A classmate saw the backside of my cousin Hideko. Oh, I have to just go back and show you. Hideko is in the front, the front line, not the boys squatting down, standing next to his grandfather. That's Hideko, my very best friend. There are a million stories under this cloud. My mother's, I started to say Hideko, someone's classmate saw the back of his head, which he had a sort of a large head that he recognized from the back. And that's all he could recognize because the rest of his body was sort of like half melting away. He was hobbling and walking towards a small or a large hill called Hijiyama in the middle of Hiroshima. If you see a map, there's a Hijiyama that used to be a cemetery at the top for some religious sect. And for some reason, a lot of people thought that if you went to Hijiyama, that it was safe. But he never made it. The friend said, the American planes went away right away, so they won't be sucked into the motion of the explosion. But they came back. And usually that's what the incendiary attacks did. They came back, and if there were people moving around, they shot at us to finish off whoever is left running away. But I think this time, and then I wasn't shot at myself, but I do remember the sound of the B-29 coming down, swooping, and then I couldn't run very fast. I can't now either, but for a different reason. And because my mother said, go to the river, go to the water, I hid in the reeds along the river, so, they can't see very well. And my poor cousin, Hideko, when your body's melted, your joints are done with. So it doesn't bend to run. It's straight. So you're going this way, and then your legs don't bend. So you fall down. And he said to his friend, go save yourself. I can't move anymore. And it haunted me so many years that lovely young man without a scar anywhere, and was only son of the Tamura industry, the heir to Tamura family, being lost that way. It's just, and my dear brother, I grew up with him. It just, something in the middle here, just, went in every direction in powder. I think maybe you have brother or sister or someone so close to your age, and then if you imagine something like that happened to them, you probably would have the same reaction, you know. It's a bond of love that was broken so suddenly, unexpectedly, we couldn't say proper goodbye or give them word of loving farewell. In a peacetime, it is so much of a luxury. You can hold someone's hand. We love you, you know. You have us. And then the person who's going, so supportive. But none of these people did that. And that really, really bothered me. And for a long time, and I'm sure in psychological terms, it's a complicated mourning, PTSD, everything. But words don't really help you. You have to work with it within yourself. How? If it happens to you, let me share with you. You can cope with it. What you have to do is put both of your feet in the mud, in the dread. And like an Indian chief who chained himself and fought back until he died, you face your stress and your trauma. If it gives you restlessness, don't get drunk with pharmaceutical aids. I mean, I hesitated to say that because I do believe it's for certain symptoms that you need to rely. And if you have influenza, if you have illnesses, you need medicines and chemistries. But if you use it extended period of time, you will not give yourself and your faculties a challenge how something in the trillions of cells in your brain can meet that challenge and come up with some imagination after hours and hours of sweat and tears and self-pity and everything else. That's the only way. Well, in my days, there were no, antidepressants or something that I can. So what I did in trying to face what I was feeling and what it may lead me to, I had no idea, but I wrote and wrote and wrote, and I read and read and read. I read all the World War II existentialist, short stories, long stories, and I wrote my own poetry, very, crude. But I was not going to let somebody tell me, oh, the war is ended, and this is. Well, it wasn't that simple. MacArthur told us we can't go to the shrines anymore because that's Yamato tribe ancestral worship. And that's what got us to, the war mongering. Well, I didn't start the war, it was beautiful places my mother used to take me to, beautiful memories, but we couldn't go anymore because that was against the occupational army's policy to retrain us to be a decent people with right kind of morals. Well, I'm just being funny, all right? But that's just the way it was. And so, but don't ever underestimate yourself. Within yourself, there is a gold mine for you to go into and excavate and work with and train to meet what life is handing you. The atom bomb I didn't ask for, you know? And you didn't tell them to drop it there either. So don't take it personally if I say anything about that. But that's how sometimes life's stresses happen. The campus crazy may run around and start shooting up. What else? People are stressed out. You know, I mean, when I was working, it was changing, and either homicidal, suicidal, hospital will take care of. And all kinds of things. Community psychiatry, closed the state hospital. I was right smack in the middle of that movement. And, you know, had lots of questions. Is this really going to work? Triage in the community. You discharge, get the minister, get the family, have outpatient plans, blah, 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 blah. I think a lot of these people went off to the street. They didn't take to this triage. So, that's totally another story, but it's the point I'm trying to tell you is you have within yourself enormous potential that one needs to trust, and of course you need medical and physical and mental health care. But it can't go on forever. Your psychiatrist isn't going to come and then, you know, go to bed with you and then stroke your back and says, you're going to be okay. You are responsible for yourself, and you have a miracle. If I tell you anything else this evening, that's less important. And that's what I kept on finding. But there is a glue to that, or the key to that. What is it? I couldn't have done it myself. I would have gone into Smotherine somewhere because I was suicidal. You need friends. You need caring friends. They stopped me. And one of them even came to the United States a couple of years ago. You know, we keep long-standing friendships. The point is, when you are going through very stressful time, in terms of survival, you need caring. And they don't have to sit down and figure out, well, okay, so you're this and your original family treated you this way, so no, just caring. They don't need to know one thing about psychiatry. Warmth and acceptance. And just sit with you in 5 minutes. And if you need to watch CNN, just sit with you. And I had friends like that. And I had friends like that. We ran newspaper. We ran student body. We did all sorts of things. And this is going to sound a little simple-minded maybe to some of you who are very intellectual and complicated. Aren't you? Missionaries. Those 5 cents and 10 cents you gave to the church to send missionaries, they also saved my life. Warmth, human warmth. Not the kind of people who, you know, looked down on you and took out Bible and then said, but someone who said, hey, come on, let's do this. Let's do that. You know, an energy for another human being. because I don't know that if we were all that different. A lot of them didn't speak Japanese, and I couldn't tell anything about English. I hated it because you had to study to know, and I didn't like studying. So let me show you. That's when the fire ceased. What's left? You see anything? No, nothing. I lost my universe, absolutely everything. My grandfather's gorgeous, gorgeous garden, and beautiful plants, flowers, trees, everything was gone. And then about the caring, that's my friend who stopped me from Etsko. You know where we're standing? Inside the dome. In those days, when we were high school, we could go in and out of the dome. You can go near now, and it really looks horrible because they fixed it with cement and all kinds of things. But it was just the way it was. Rubbles inside, bent wall, steel frames. And this is my missionary, Mary Frances Jones. She was from Odessa, New York. She was Methodist. Phys ed teacher. Splendid woman. Do you know why she could be so close to us? Her father died when she was 8 years old. From her life experience, she knew separation really complicates your life and makes it very difficult. And that's my American mother. I came to the States, and it was the day of my graduation from the College of Worcester. Do you know U.S. News and Report listed within top 10? No wonder I didn't make any A's. I made a few, like art, like... And I think I made an A in debate and argumentation. Anyway, it is still a very difficult, high-standard school. And this is a very interesting experience I had. In 1997, I was asked to come share my thoughts in Nashville, Tennessee for peace action people. And there I met former military photographer by the name of John O'Donnell. And he was a photographer attaché who took pictures of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. I think really a lot of them in Nagasaki. And he put all those pictures away in a little chest in the attic. Never looked back, because these were 38 or 40 pictures were made by his own camera and his own film, because it would have been against military rule for him to have kept anything. He handed all the official films and didn't look at it. 50 years passed. He looked at it and changed his attitude. He wanted other Americans to see him. Nobody would accept it. And it was interesting because after the end of the war, he was assigned to the White House, and he was a White House photographer. So he had lots of connections, the last of which was Jacqueline Kennedy, who had humongous tragedy, and he thought she would help him because she was also working with a publisher in New York. And she said, John, can't do it. It is best kept secret, except for the survivors. And the peace activist folks, thank you, Peter, and thank you, everyone who feel like some of the others besides you in high positions like MacArthur, admirals, Eisenhower. You know, I mean, it's just to list a lot of names who felt we really have to slow down about this nuclear weapons because they knew the truth about it. The rest of America was kept very blindfolded for the publicity will discourage military plan to keep ready with nuclear weapons and keep on having it in Cold War competition to be par with their stocks. Without commenting any, pros and cons about that, it is very dangerous for the rest of us because in the history, a position of things, there are a few things that we didn't use if we had it. Because when you look back in, from earliest chronicled war, Peloponnesian War, where Greek imperialism was given upper hand because they had superior navy, or the Romans had superior engineering capacity, the faster chariot or the faster whatever, each upped the other, in defending what they considered was a threat to the country. This is really very scary. So even if we don't take out the sit-downs and starving ourselves to really do all of the really courageous things that the people do, protesting, this is scary. I want you to know. And you don't need to be anti-government to really educate yourself what this bomb does. And we are a very good source of that information because the only two cities that were bombed where the nuclear weapons were used were us. I'm adding to that my concern because I can see it in myself. That some of you stopped to see that I wrote a memoir, One Sunny Day, 20 years ago. So I updated and more current version, 20 years now. I added a chapter because there were not just these physical horrible things that happen, but accompanying psychiatric, psychological, emotional, mental things that the people maybe just don't realize, and you didn't hear it from other survivors. For example, let me see what time I have. I think I'm overspent. Let me just read a short paragraph. I think I'm past my time. One part that you didn't even think about is supposed to be such a joyful, wonderful life experience. I have to tell you something from at the instance of my first child's birth. My daughter was just, out to say her first cry, and the doctor pulled her up. And that's the most miracle moment, all right? For anyone, especially for mother, the joy of her life. And this is part of my last chapter, so allow me to read it. The moment the newborn daughter was pulled up by doctor in the air and made her first cry, she was covered by blood. For just an instant, blood covered a tiny body, a beautiful gift of life, born of me. The happiest moment of birth flashed an unconscious shudder. Cutting off my feelings of joy, though feeling joyful and happy, there was numbness somewhere, like a coat of film covering my body. God, help me away from Hiroshima. Please wipe away the blood from my baby. I didn't know that was going to happen. And just countless moments like this in life experience. And the other part is, how can you stay a human being, a human person, if you remember a horrible, horrible snuffing of life that you were exposed to physically and visually, and it will never go away, and it keeps on coming back. People who ask, give me water, and I couldn't give them water. I could still hear it. And my mother who never came back, but I saw enough people who were squashed on the concrete building or who were dying in the refugee places. Although I didn't find her. There's no closure in grief. Let me tell you, you just kind of put it aside. There's no closure for that. It's war. And for the living people, war never ended August 15th, 1945, because remember, Sadako was okay until she was 8 or 9. Then all of a sudden, leukemia. Nobody in the family had leukemia. Thyroid, lung cancer, breast cancer, multiple cancer. Those are time bombs. I ran really off-the-chart high fever the second month after the run, and, bordered between life and death. And then after that, I was no good for energy. It was just like, I remember still the sound of the cow. I sat next to the cow, and then the cow said, moo, and I looked at, is this the only creature that I have for companion? No one else could care less. And those times you do shut down. And I spent my time just reading and reading and reading and reading. And writing poetry. But what kept me sane, people, was I was curious. I was always wanting to understand why. Why is this and why is that? Where is the truth? How come all the values are now just upside down and we can't believe in anything anymore? Why? And I think people just went this way. But it kept my mind alive. So if you get to be, somebody going this way, you should be yourself, unless you're hurting somebody. I mean, I wasn't trying to hurt anybody. I was just very curious. I needed to understand human conditions. And I think that helped me. And one last thing, I know I'm just way over past time. One thing that happened to me, I think, drove me to stay in human services is that I lost feelings because it was so hard to be vivid and open, to be affected. I had to be able to go to sleep and function, show up at work, and, you know. And another part it showed up was somebody, I noticed when I was in college, somebody asked me a question, my mind would go blank. And I had really nothing to contribute to. And that was very unusual because I was usually filled with things to say. But, you know, I was sort of like a robot. I was smiling a lot, and a philosophy professor once told me, he said he used to be so depressed every morning, but when he came to his class, I was sitting in front smiling. And that was encouraging. And I didn't understand what he meant at that time. Years later, it came to me. Oh, I bet he said to himself, there is a girl who, you know, survived the A-bomb, and then she's smiling. Whoa, what am I depressed about? But that was easy for me to do because I killed my feelings. And that was also a survival mode. And it wasn't my doing. I never said to my conscious or unconscious, kill it. It just went. So, and do you know what? When it came back, in the middle of my graduate study course in human services at the University of Chicago, common human needs, Charlotte Tall, very famous woman, was sitting there and then talking about it. And I said, oh my God. And she was showing, there's a pattern, the human beings behave this way or feel this way. There's when these needs are, blah, 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 blah. And I said, oh my God, I wasn't the, hopeless character. There was a pattern and a reason that I don't have to feel so small and stupid. I thought it was the character defect, that I wasn't strong enough. So my feelings would come back when I'm listening to my patients' problems. Because there wasn't a thing that they would say that I hadn't experienced myself. Million things. Although I hadn't taken any dope. But but I know how it is, And then one of them said, all these people keep on telling me, trying. And then she said, I'm sick of trying now. And I knew what she meant. So that life isn't easy. And then keep on trying has to be there. So I spent, 40 years or so in human services. Had a wonderful time. And some people call me a miracle worker. And it was no miracle. I tried to do what I really tried to do was present my authentic self and be with them, journey with them, and then be human respondent, And then so a couple of days ago I see in the Medscape, they have this longitudinal, large research that the schizophrenia, the treatment benefits from talking therapy. Instead of, shutting them in closet with just medications. So I thought to myself, you find out now, I knew that 30 years ago. Anyway, there's endless stories. Let's see what I have. Oh, that's my daughter. 2006, we took Peace Choir of Ashland to Hiroshima, Kyoto, Kobe, and had a wonderful time. My friends, helped me set it all up. And she sang a solo. She wrote a lyric herself and sang it to the melody of Danny Boy. And that's really, hard thing she did. And when she was fine when she was singing about, I sing for you and this and that. But when she came to, but your daughter sat on the riverbank and waited for you and you never came back, her voice started to crack. So, I was just into my own trip of grief, and then she's having trouble. So I walked up and started to, stroke her back, and we sort of kind of finished it together. It's a second generation Hibakusha. There are some physical problems, and obviously mental problem, because I had lots of problems. And in the same trip, Marston's conducting the famous male Glee Club people and Ashland Peace Choir male singers sang together at my request. Tenting Tonight. Oh, that was so hard to make it happen because, I have to get the sheets and I had to get, some commentaries how to sing it, this, and didn't have too much great cooperation, but I pushed and pushed and pushed. There's something to persistence. I did do that, all right. Anybody know Tenting Tonight? It's a wonderful anti-war song from Civil War. It's a beautiful song. And these are the people who made it happen. In the middle is my friend Etsuko, and on the side, guess what my daughter became? A psychiatrist. She just passed her written and oral exams, full-fledged psychiatrist, and is running a program called Joy Initiatives. Isn't that something? It's a new approach to treatment of depression. People, Joy Initiatives. You can do it too. Really? Oops, I think I did it. They told me if you don't click it right, it will disappear. Yeah, haha. Okay, so, my memoir, and then I wanted something open and simple and condensed. Seeds of Peace, affirming life, love, and caring. I do believe Seeds of Peace, even prompted in the most horrific way from the war and killing and loss of life, but because of the intensity of the impacts of it on human psyche, and knowing and having lived through the consequences, 100% front and back, side and everywhere assault, but somehow managed to come back, not just by myself, but because of the support from surrounding. Human race is flawed, but it is a wonderful, wonderful creature, and especially gifted with, you think you are young and you have forever. It's only for a short time. For us to make difference, for us to know who we are and where we want to go. And you have a power to impact and put input into it. Please do. From the heart of this survivor, I ask you. Thank you.